I got some Pepsid on me. So
Excellent. Then we're good. We're good to go.
Valid warning. Valid warning.
Welcome to Where We Land, a podcast where we share stories about immigration and multicultural identity. I'm Luciana.
And I'm Claudia.
We're originally from Peru, so we have a pretty good idea of what living between two cultures is like. But we believe that no matter where you come from, immigrating to the U.S. is an experience rich with duality and meaning. Join us as we speak with immigrants from all over the world about their journey and how it shaped who they are today.
In this episode, we're bringing you our conversation with Michelle MiJung Kim. Michelle is a powerful voice in social justice, corporate equity, and activism. And she is the award-winning author of The Wake Up, Closing the Gap Between Good Intentions and Real Change. She's also the CEO and co-founder of Awaken, where she has guided countless Fortune 500 companies, tech giants, and nonprofits on their path toward real equity and inclusion. And she has a new podcast out called I Feel That Way Too, a show that aims to unpack existential questions.
We spoke with Michelle about her journey of moving to America as a teenager, finding her passion in social justice work, and how her identity and immigration experience grew into a powerful source of strength along the way.
Here's our conversation with Michelle.
So, okay, where in the world does your journey start?
I was born and raised in Seoul, Korea, and my parents were divorced when I was a young kid. So my parents separated right before I went to elementary school. And my dad actually ended up moving to the States, where he was an undocumented immigrant for over a decade. And so my mom was raising me and my sister as a single working parent. So most of the time I was actually raised by my grandparents and really myself.
Okay. So then what was it that prompted your move to the US? Was it to meet up with your dad?
Yeah, and I think this is a common experience for a lot of immigrants and children of immigrants. The narrative that I heard when my mom told me that I was going to move to the States was for my education. So my mom and dad decided that since my dad was getting settled in the States, that it would be the best idea for me and my sister to move to be with my dad so that we can pursue our education in the States. I think that was probably one of the greatest sacrifices that she's made in her life when it comes to us, that she sent us to the States so that we can live with our dad in pursuit of education and success and the American dream that we always talk about. And my mom stayed behind. Eventually, she moved to the States to be with us, but it was a long time before she was able to do that. It wasn't until I was fully settled in as a working person with money to be able to support my mom financially that I was able to fully settle her in the States. So probably in my early mid-20s is when she came and settled down. I consider myself really lucky that I got to maintain my relationship with my parents when we were separated in both countries.
That must have been really hard. I'm curious about moving as a teenager, because when Luciana and I moved to California, we were very young. Allegedly, I was 4. I think I was 5. We don't know. But one of those immigrant mysteries, right? Like you're like, mom says it's this, dad said, yeah.
You know, so much of my childhood is a blur, and I always say, trauma brain.
Right?
And like, where's the passport? Yeah. Where's the
stamp? Where someone somewhere knows what year I came to this country. Somewhere. Yeah. I'm curious when I hear someone who moved as a teenager, how did that impact your immigrant experience? The fact that you had this whole other childhood somewhere else and then came here.
Yeah, such a good question. I was just a typical teenager in Korea. I grew up listening to the latest K-pop, fangirling over different artists, eating street food with other kids, going to karaoke. So I had a fully formed sort of list of things that I enjoyed doing and my own sort of teenage experiences living in Korea. And so when I came to the States as a teenager, I mean, what a just terrible age to immigrate
and
experience being othered, right? Because it's hard enough to be a teenager already, but to be thrown into that environment was just an added bonus of character building life phase. Because I was so hell-bent on succeeding in this country, and because so many people told me how I can accelerate that assimilation period, I made a very conscious decision to cut ties with a lot of the cultures and things that used to give me joy. So that looked like me not watching any Korean dramas or TV shows that I loved to watch before. It meant me stop listening to all the K-pop music that I used to love and adore. It meant me not speaking Korean to my family as much as possible so that I could learn English really fast. It meant not using my Korean name. I only reclaimed my Korean name MiJung when my book was published in 2021. And I lived my entire life going by Michelle because people told me, if you use your ethnic name, people are going to mispronounce it. They're going to not remember you as much. And you're not going to get callbacks for interviews when you write your name down on resumes. So it was a very, practical thing in my mind to just shed all the things that used to define me as a Korean person. And it wasn't until very later in life that I started to really understand the cost and what that period did to my own sense of identity and my wholeness.
I mean, it's survival.
Yeah.
It's like, you said, I want to be successful here. You just want to blend in. You got to survive. We all know how it is. And it's almost like Claudia and I had the opposite because we moved back to Peru when I was 12.
In our early teens, yeah.
Early teens.
Pre-teens.
And Claudia and I we would speak English at home. We would consume all things Nickelodeon, all things after school special, like Saved by the Bell, all that. So when we went to Peru, everyone's watching telenovelas and that. And Claudia and I are just, what is that? We're Peruvian. We're supposed to know this. We're just going to pretend we know. And the minute we would walk out the door, Spanish, our broken Spanish was the only thing coming out of our mouths. And we would just nod when people reference stuff because we couldn't be, the Americans in Peru. So it's really relatable.
Right. And something that's been really a full circle moment is my book came out this year in Korea. So they translated my book into Korean, and to be able to hold this piece of work that I've birthed, truly it's a collection of my lived experiences, my stories, things that I've learned, things that I've had to overcome as a queer immigrant woman here. All of that now is in my native language. And to be able to have that be shared with my motherland, it feels really special. And that's been yet another sort of connection that I have with where I come from.
That's really nice. That's really, really nice. I want to switch gears a little bit. In researching you for this interview, we saw that you identify as queer.
Yep.
And I'm curious how that fits or doesn't into the version of Korean culture you grew up with. And if you're comfortable sharing, what navigation, if any, did that require, be it with your family or your Korean friends?
Yeah. Well, so I didn't even know what being queer was when I was growing up in Korea because it just was never taught. It wasn't until I had my first crush on a girl that my whole world turned upside down. And I always thought that I was straight and that I liked boys. But here I was on a dance team, and I was crushing so hard over this other girl who was an amazing dancer. And at first I thought I was just admiring her, but it was probably more than that. Very quickly, it turned out to be a lot more than that. And so I was very lucky that I found a support group at my high school that was very underground with openly and not openly queer people gathering to support each other. And that's when I started to really understand what it meant to be bisexual, what it meant to be queer. And I remember having a conversation with my mom who, wasn't familiar with any of these things. And I remember telling her that I think I might be bi. I said, well, I have a crush on this girl and she's really cute. And my mom goes, well, everybody goes through that phase. I went through a similar phase where you just idolize other girls. And I was like, Mom, do we need to talk about this?
You're like, wait.
It's like, wait a minute.
Who's the one that got away? Mom,
right,
still.
exactly. And she was like, every girl goes through that phase of idolizing older girls where you want to be like them and you can admire their beauty and you can admire their intelligence, but it doesn't mean that you love them or that you are gay. And I remember just telling her, I was like, well, but did you want to kiss them too? And she just looked at me, shook her head. She's like, no, I did not. She's like, do you want to kiss them? And I was like, yeah, I think so. So that's my coming out story to my mom. And eventually she came around and she's the biggest supporter and advocate for all things LGBTQ. Every year she wants to wear her rainbow stuff during Pride. So it's really cute. It took my dad a bit longer to come around. And we've had some tough moments in our lives to be able to get to a mutual understanding and his eventual acceptance of who I am. But I'm lucky in that, my identity didn't cause disconnection or abandonment in terms of my family relationships.
A lot of things happened in your teen years, it seems like, because also in your teen years is when you started to work in social justice.
Yeah.
Right? So where do you think that interest in that specific type of work and also the impulse to actually do it, where did that come from, do you think?
Well, I think it definitely started when I came out as queer, and I ended up going to a queer camp, LGBTQ youth camp. And that's where I became really politicized, right? I was frequently called into the principal's office for causing what I would call good trouble and staging demonstrations and protests and stuff like that. And I continued that work into my college years. But when I think about what got me so passionate about doing that work as a teenager, I think a big influence comes from my grandfather, who was a philosopher, who also was a civil rights activist, liberation activist in Korea when Korea was colonized by Japan. And he always taught me the importance of being in solidarity with people with less power. He would talk to me about, how I need to respect people no matter what position they are in society, right? Like the way that I treat my bus driver or our custodial staff should be the same way that I treat a mega billionaire CEO. I think that kind of, early stage teachings really had an impact on me. And when I continued to experience the opposite of that play out in society, whether that was people disrespecting my parents for their broken English, or like me not being able to pay for certain things that my school required and feeling alienated because of that experience, I just felt really frustrated and angry. Like, but this is not how it's supposed to be. Like, we should all be able to navigate every space with dignity. And I think that sort of fire was always inside of me because of my grandfather. And it just got unlocked in ways that was channeled into activism when I became politicized at the queer camp.
Yeah.
Right. And how was going into this field of work received by your family, by your close friends?
I don't think my grandparents really knew what I was doing. I don't know that my mom and dad really know what I do still. I think my mom may be more so because she follows me on Instagram and she likes everything that I post the second I post it because she gets the notification.
Oh my gosh. Parents are all the same.
But, I think even though I think that they are proud of the work that I do, I think at the core of it, I think they're still worried about my survival. I think they're still worried about my stability. Right out of college, I went into management consulting, even though my heart wasn't necessarily in corporate America because I needed to make money. I needed to make money to bring my mom here. I needed to have this stability that I know my parents always yearned for me. So when I decided to go on my own way and become an entrepreneur, I remember my dad feeling really nervous and trying to dissuade me from quitting my tech job that was paying me really well. And he was really worried that I was going to starve, which is all based in his own trauma, right? So I can also have compassion for that. So yeah.
Yeah, I just have to say, when you mentioned that your mom to this day probably has no idea what you're doing, I just felt like we had the same mom. Yeah. Because I cannot tell you.
We all have the same moms, yeah. Did your parents have like a job that they wanted you to do when you grow up?
Oh, yes. Dr. Lawyer.
Dr. Lawyer. See, we had the same mom.
Well, I would say like, yes.
Yeah.
We want you to know where your next paycheck is coming from. Also, I'm sure they must be very proud of the work that you do. And like, I think it would be impossible for any parent not to feel that when they see their child. But also, first and foremost, you just want your kid to be safe. I can understand that. But
yeah. And I think what you're bringing up is so interesting, right? Because our parents, all they want for us is stability and safety. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes, especially when it comes to certain issues that are seen as risky to talk about, there is this repercussion and penalty that can come from us talking about marginalized people and our politics in a certain way, right? And as of late, over the last year, I've been a very vocal, visible advocate for Palestine. And my dad, let me tell you, he is so concerned about my ability to sustain myself because he understands the risk that this type of advocacy brings. Coming from an immigrant background, coming from a low-income background, coming from their lived experiences of having to give up so much to give us the stability that we have, I think they can't make that math work inside their head sometimes, which also, is heartbreaking for me to see and enraging in many ways because I don't want to live in a society where doing the right thing costs us our job and security and safety.
Yeah, very true. You've started to talk about this. What makes up your community today? Like, I'm curious, people, groups, places. How do you stay connected to that community?
Well, community, I think, is everything. And I think one of the biggest differences that I noticed between the culture of the US versus the culture that I grew up in is the collectivist culture versus individualistic culture, where I think it was so obvious to me that here it's very insular. It's very like my family, my success. And it's really, I don't know, like I see a lot of people who feel isolated and lonely, even if they have friends, even if they have coworkers, because I don't think that the idea and the values of community and community care is something that people grow up learning about or pursuing really intentionally. Compared to other cultures that have so much history in collective living, collective care, right? I mean, the way that my parents think of love is sacrifice. Whether that's healthy or unhealthy, that's a whole other conversation, right? But it's this idea of, I love you and therefore I am going to risk this, right? Like I'm going to sacrifice this. And I think there is something really just tangible and beautiful about that mindset of we can't live alone. We can't be in isolation.
You know what? You're right. Community is so important. And I think for a lot of our listeners and fellow immigrants, when you first move to a new country, finding community in that new space can be very difficult, very tricky.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So having been an immigrant yourself, as a teen, what would you recommend for finding community in a new country?
That is hard. It's a hard
really
one.
Hard. Yeah. Honestly, like asking for a friend. I just moved back to the United States 2 years ago, and I'm still looking for it.
Yeah, and I think there are so many levels to this, right? For example, my dad, when he first got to San Diego, I think one of the first things that he did was look for a Korean church, even though he was not a devout Christian.
Right.
In fact, I'm pretty sure he's agnostic, if not an atheist, but he went to Korean church because that's where he knew he could find other Korean people that he could build, community with. And so I think people have different ways of finding different types of people that they can connect to. But I think when I really felt like I belong somewhere and that this is my people, it wasn't until I found people who were sharing the values that I have around the kind of world that we wanted to build. And that was made up of all kinds of people. It wasn't just Korean people. So it was a whole diverse selection of people who shared similar values and vision of the world and how we wanted to care for each other. In that community, I felt the most authentically me and safe and whole. So for me, it's always leading with your values and going where your values lead you.
It's definitely like a great place for anyone to start. It's hard. All right. Well, we had heard also the exciting news that you are going to be joining the podcasting world. So
yes.
That's very exciting. What can you tell us about your podcast?
So my podcast is called I Feel That Way Too. And I chose that name because I think so much of my work of telling my stories is so that people don't feel alone in their struggles. So the podcast, I Feel That Way Too, is about us unpacking all these questions that feel existential, from who am I without my job to why are friendship breakups so painful to how do I love myself and love my family at the same time, to am I supposed to sleep with one person for the rest of my life? So these are all the questions that I've been thinking about in my life that I'm sure I'm not the only
questions.
Exactly.
That sounds like a lot of fun. We are asking a version of this question to everyone who comes on the show. So we know that this can change over time, okay? So at this precise moment, do you feel more Korean or more American?
Oh, this is a provocative question. Yes.
Spicy.
I cannot answer that in a binary way.
Valid.
Yep.
Yeah, because I think my identity is such a mix of all kinds of identities and lived experiences that I feel really whole in saying that I feel very much in between. And I feel my groundedness in that hyphenated space of being a Korean American. And I think there is wholeness in that in-between space.
For sure.
That's very true. That's very true.
Yeah.
Luciana and I are always so curious about this because we ourselves have seen it change within us over time. So we always talk about it in percentages for some reason, and they're all made up. We go like, today I'm feeling, I think like 30% American, because as little kids, sometimes we felt more American. At other long stretches of time, we felt incredibly Peruvian, and like America was like this place we once went to, and
so almost like denying, and now we're like, oh wait, I love it here. Like it's just so.
It's so subject to change, but we do feel at this age, both of us, like very much both. We understand that the mix is within us and neither is going to ever disappear, but we do like to keep tabs on it.
Okay, so what does that feel like to feel more American or more Peruvian? What does that mean?
So, do you know what? Like, I think that if we would have asked us when we were little, I think we would have been like American for sure. Because I don't think we really had... Like we had a connection, we knew we were Peruvian, but I think we really were very Americanized, like our language first and foremost, our culture. Like we would visit Peru once a year and like it was, it was still like a faraway place for us and we were living here. And then I think when we went back, it was like, oh wait, no, this is who we are.
And yes, we always say first and foremost, always Peruvian, but the Americanness is there. And the more time we spend in American culture, living in American things with American friends, we feel it more. And then when I go back to Peru and I'm immersed with my Peruvian friends and my Peruvian culture, and I'm eating all the Peruvian food and I'm listening to the music, and I'm just like, this is my people, this is my land. I will never be anything else.
Right. Yeah. You know what? At the end of the day, how amazing that we can be both.
Yes.
It is just like, it just makes it richer. It makes this, and that you don't have to choose, and that we get to dabble and feel super Peruvian and then feel like really American. And it just makes it richer, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. I think, the only thing that I would say is like, sometimes I think we think about being American as a very one-dimensional, homogenous thing. Like when I was living in Korea, I always thought of America as like a land of white people and or Black people, but mostly white people, because that's what I saw in movies, right? So I think like whenever people say like, what does it mean to be an American? I have to be really conscious about me not equating America with whiteness, whether it's race or the way that we speak or the way that we behave in this country, because there is a difference. Right? That America, as I understand it, as I want to live it, is so much more rich and multidimensional than that, because all of us make up America today. And historically too.
Yeah, being American can include our Peruvianness, and it can include your Koreanness. For sure. Okay, we'll leave it at that. I think that was wonderful.
Amazing.
Thank you. So we have a segment called Snack Stories, where our guest brings us a snack they grew up with. And so, Michelle, what snack are we eating today?
Okay, so this is one of my favorite snacks, especially late night when I'm craving something salty, spicy, and crunchy.
Interesting.
It's ramyeon. So Japanese version is ramen, which I think more people in America are familiar with. In Korea, we call it ramyeon. So this is Shinramyeon, one of the most popular ramen brands, and it happens to be my favorite to eat raw. So that's what we're going to do today. We're not going to cook this. Well, this is what I used to do when I was a kid too. Like on school field trips, somebody would inevitably sneak one of these in and we would eat it on the school bus. So the way that we do this is you don't open it just yet. You have to break the noodles. So this is going to make a lot of noise.
Yeah, it's very satisfying.
Yes. Okay. When you're in a good place.
My toddler would like this.
You're going to open it.
Got it.
Okay. And then you're going to see 2 packets of things. This is dried vegetables. You're not going to use this. So just like set it aside.
No vegetables. Got
No
it.
veggies.
No. Yeah, no veggies.
Only the tinfoil one.
Only the tinfoil sauce. It's like the seasoning.
Oh.
So you shake the seasoning, and then you open it, and pour this into the packet. Oh, yeah. Okay.
It smells good.
Yeah.
And then shake it.
Oh my gosh, it mixed in really well.
Yes.
It was coated. Okay.
And then you have a bite, and let me know what you think. Cheers.
Okay. Cheers.
Cheers.
I like that.
Oh, good.
That is a very like it's spicy, but it's not like it doesn't hurt your tongue
just
or anything.
going. You're just going for it.
Okay.
It's
spicy.
It's tangy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ooh. It's hot.
It's addicting.
This is a good snack. You guys, I recommend this 100%.
This is really good.
Okay, for the audience, I want to describe this because you would think, my first impression, let me tell you guys, it's not hard to eat. You break them up and you get these little clusters, noodle clusters. So it's almost like you're picking up chips. It's great. Just
And
for
the
the audience.
seasoning is everything. Like,
I know.
The seasoning is, I could put that on a lot of things.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Michelle, for coming on our podcast. It was so much fun to talk to you. We
So
loved
nice
hearing
to meet
everything
you.
about your story.
Thank you for having
Yeah.
me.
Yeah. No, it was
I'm glad
really
that y'all
great.
enjoyed the stories, but also the snack.
The snack is bomb.
So we just finished our conversation with Michelle. How did this land for you?
This was like, what a treat. Michelle was wonderful. She was so cool and fun to talk to. I really enjoyed it. And oh my gosh, the food.
The food was so good. Her snack was great. And also such an interesting story, different from ours. The moving to America as a teenager was just, my heart went out to her.
Yeah.
I could not imagine doing that.
Rough.
That sounded really rough and really scary, honestly.
I think there were so many topics that she touched on that can relate to so many people. And clearly she's thriving. Her parents must be so proud. The journey of getting her parents over here, just so many relatable topics, the fitting in, the removing her, otherness to just blend in, navigating it as a teenager. So many relatable topics, really.
Yeah. One I want to specifically zoom in on was when she mentioned that she changed her name, that she shedded her Korean name and adopted Michelle, and that she only later reclaimed her Korean name when she published her book, which was obviously much, much later in life. I found that so, not only was it very interesting, and it says a lot about what you are willing to do to just fit in and feel accepted and find community and make friends. But also, I have a very bilingual name. People know the name Claudia in English. People know the name Claudia in Spanish. It's fine. I get away with it wherever I am.
Yep.
But as far as our last name goes, I remember it was first grade. We had to stand up and say our first name and last name, and then like our favorite color and one other thing or whatever. And I remember as they were going around the circle and it was getting closer and closer to me, in my head going, how do I say this? Like, how do you say this in English so that they understand it? How do I say this name so that it's not, because if I say Valdiviezo, they're not going to be able to say it back to me ever.
Yeah.
And there's going to be reactions. There's going to be like, what? What's that? Because there's first graders. So like, like, what is that? And I remember for the first time in my life, figuring out how to say my name in English. And I landed on Claudia Valdiviezo.
Right.
And I was like, Valdiviezo, if I can say it in English with an English accent, they can say it back to me.
Yeah.
And at first grade, I was doing that kind of mental gymnastics to be like, how do I digest this for this American audience?
I'm nodding the whole time you're speaking because I think we all did that, by all of us, everyone in our family. I mean, I know I've done the same thing. I might even still be doing it if I'm super honest. Like, I start a new job and my name I'm Luciana Valdiviezo. I don't say Valdiviezo. I do it a little bit with my first name as well. For a longest time, I was like, Lucy, just call me Lucy, Lucy, Lucy. And it's true. A lot of people in Peru call me Lucy. And lately, and this might just be getting older or a same thing as Michelle, reclaiming, I'm saying Luciana a lot more. And they can look at me like, oh my God, do you really want me to call her that? Or they'll just say like, Luciana, and that's my name. And sure, do I mind being called Lucy? No, but my name is Luciana. And that's the name I'm going to go by.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. But so relatable to want to change. I can understand that. I've done it. We've all done it. But it's a process I think everyone goes through at their own time.
Yeah. Yeah. Something else that she clearly is, very active, speaks out. She started at a young age speaking out about controversial issues and balancing her parents' desire to don't be too loud, stay on the safe route with work, with have the safety job, like the paycheck that's coming in regularly in a reliable industry. That was, I thought, also quite relatable because, of course, as a parent, you want your child to be safe first and foremost. But I found I thought it was curious that, she found that voice. Maybe it was just she was always going to find it, but she found that voice as a teenager here and the strength and maybe the audience and the space to feel safer doing that than maybe she would have been in Korea. I don't know. I find that in Peru is more traditional, more conservative. Peru feels like a place where it's just there's less space for that,
For sure. Well, I think there's a couple of things there. Like one thing, I do remember her saying that like her grandfather was an activist and was very into philosophy and just like someone who really inspired her to go into this line of work. So I think like for sure in Korea, maybe she would have found that voice too and like championed the causes she still champions today. We didn't really ask her about this as far as Korea, but as far as Peru is concerned, it's such a small country. You can't really make a living being an activist. You can't really make much of a living being a podcaster in Peru either, if we're being honest, because just the marketplace isn't there, right? So that's one thing. And then the other thing, the fact that Peru is more conservative and that you said, well, here you feel like more of a freedom to just speak your mind about anything you like. I feel the same way. And it's true, Peru is a like majority Catholic country. There's still some very like traditional things in our Peruvian culture. Yeah, I can completely understand not feeling as free to speak your mind on everything. Whereas here I do feel that openness from people. And
it's encouraged even. Like it's kind of institutional, like in schools here in the US, where you have the committee for X, Y, Z, the group for this. That doesn't exist.
That doesn't exist in Peru.
Massive way in Peru.
Yeah. You know? Peruvian institutions across the board are still pretending Peru is a very homogenous country.
Right.
And it's not. Right. But we're still like formally pretending that it is.
Yeah.
So yeah, I understand what you're saying there.
Yeah. I mean, just so many interesting topics and conversations across the board. She is just an energy. It was such a joy to speak with her. It was so fun. And the snack, oh my God, I'm still recovering. Like I'm still taking Tums.
Oh my gosh. While we were eating it, I was like, this isn't that spicy. And then as things went on, I was like, no, this is the spiciest thing I've ever had. I don't think I can have it again. I'm sorry.
And I still have a bazillion packs because I bought the big pack. But it was so tasty.
It was really, really tasty. I do have to agree on that. Yeah, so that's it from us. Subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. And check us out on Instagram at Where We Land Pod. Hasta la vista, babies.
Ciao, ciao. At Where We Land, we know some immigrant experiences are harder than others, especially for those in the margins of our current legal system. If you would like to help, we encourage you to support organizations that provide services for immigrants and champion their rights.
You can find a list of organizations in the show notes.